Okay, so we're just going to quickly go over these assignments, and then the next lecture we'll dive into some fun stuff. Okay, so the discussion board rubric. It's a general rubric, but so I will be discussing my expectations. The discussion board is the only way you're interacting throughout the week. This is your class attendance. So, all right, so initial posting, are you getting it done on time? 2 points. Addresses the issues. So are you covering the prompt? And are you using professional references and citations? You have to. You have to use evidence to support what you're talking about. These need to be deep responses because that's how I know that you understand the concepts. And I'm going to show you an example. Do you interact with at least 2 other peers and provide meaningful interaction? Meaning you can't just say, oh, good post. The point of discussion board is to drive a discussion, ask questions, take your peers' ideas a little bit further, provide a new resource for them to look at. And then APA and spelling, I really, really expect you, I expect you to use APA references. And it's like writing a paper, so it needs to be professionally written. Okay, so I'm going to show you an example of an exemplary discussion board post. So I'm going to show you one on community disasters. All right, so it says, this is the prompt, a natural disaster has the ability to happen in any community in the United States. What disaster could happen in your community? What is the plan of action for your organization if the disaster would occur? What steps would the nursing staff utilize in order to ensure that the patients were safe? What would be the nurse's role in preparedness, response, and recovery stages? So these are all the questions that need to be answered, and they need to be answered thoroughly, and they need to be well researched and documented, okay? I always will write, this is actually a really brief example of a post. I'll show you another one, but I always post. So if you're kind of lost, you can look at my example to give you ideas. But as you see here are my references in APA format. All right, so it says the American Nurses Association Code of Ethics is explicit in the Registered Nurse Unrelentless Committee to the Patient. But Provision 9 is implicit in the RN's call to care for a community in the event of disaster. So see how, this is how you do abbreviations in APA, okay? And then the second time, that's how you do it. Look, this is proper citation. Disaster planning is an important aspect in community and population health, laying out specific steps and guidelines for communities' response to any mass casualty or mass patient crisis. So I talked about what that meant, and I used evidence because I am not an expert in explaining what disaster planning is. So if you give me a definition, I expect it to be supported by resources. There are a variety of disasters that occur in communities and up until now mainly been focused on weather-related or natural disasters such as hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, or fires. However, disease pandemics and recently large-scale violent events are essential to address in disaster preparedness in the United States because it's not just about weather now, right? We have diseases like hepatitis A outbreaks, and we have, unfortunately, these large-scale violent events like shootings. So Cincinnati, Ohio is likely to experience natural disasters such as flooding or tornadoes, right? Because that's where we live. And large-scale violent events are essential to address. We're also just as vulnerable to violent disasters. While the Cincinnati Health Department is the city's public health service for Hamilton County, disaster plans are not practiced often nor recently updated. So this is how you properly document a personal communication of an interview. That's with the health commissioner. Historically, the mobilization of nurses during a disaster has been hasty and non-sustainable in the United States. Again, this is documented. This is supported by data, because how would I know that unless I looked it up? Education is essential in preparing local nurse groups to prepare for community call to action. And then I go on to explain the rest of the prompt, how we can be prepared and what are the steps that we need to follow. So then also you get graded on your response to somebody else. I will show you an example of another post. And they don't have to be like 20 pages long, but they do have to be thorough. So local epidemiology, the prompt talked about different issues in the city, and this was mine. So this was a little more thorough. All right, so that's my expectations on discussion boards. Okay. Obviously, the first discussion board, you don't have to use APA because it's always an introduction one. So assignment, role of the public health nurse. So you're going to research the roles of public health nurse that you're interested in observing, and then you're going to write a 2 to 3 page paper that answers the following questions. So first of all, tell me what role it is. What concepts of public health nursing does their practice reflect? So if they're a case manager, is that care coordination? If they're vaccines, is that disease prevention? What are the day-to-day job duties of this public health nurse? So again, you need to look up articles about this and you need to cite them. What is the employment outlook for this public health nurse? So that's something you can research quite easily. And then would the nurse be involved in policy formulation that affects client services? BTW, the answer is always yes, and you're going to go into detail how they can do that and examples of that from the literature. All right, community assessment. Every community class will do this, but you're going to go to your book, table 12.3, and you're going to make a PowerPoint presentation on your community. All the elements on page 220 and 12.3 must be addressed in PowerPoint presentation. You're going to provide then after that, you're going to do a 2 to 3 slide analysis about the community using concepts from the course. And then you have to use 4 journal articles that are less than 5 years old to support your analysis. So no websites. These are real journal articles, okay? So you're going to talk about boundaries, and all this is broken down in the book, housing and zoning, all these different things. You're going to analyze the community. So where are their gaps? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? And what are things we can do to overcome the barriers? And then, of course, everything still has to be in APA format. And then here's information on the journals. It's really simple. You're just going to reflect on each visit and talk about just different concepts that you notice from the course, and you'll turn them in here. So that's really easy to do. All right. So that was an introduction to the course, and now we will get into the fun concepts.